Hello, I'm Richard Burton from the Richard Burton Watercolour channel here on the Yorkshire coast, and today I'm going to ask you a simple question. Do you struggle with water reflections? Well, we're going to do a simple seascape and it's going to capture those reflections, and I'm going to show you how we can capture it by painting onto that moist and damp surface, which is the magic element to it, and it will show you a relatively straightforward approach how we can develop that. Not only that, in the course of this painting, we've had a bit of a disaster, to be fair. We had some mistakes, and I'm going to also show you how to fix them. Because that's the one thing about watercolour I think you might find helpful is how to fix mistakes. And this is one where we're going to really do that. Also, we've been developing our watercolour guide. Many of you have signed up for this, and this is our 5 steps into watercolour. It's a simple guide. If you're new to watercolour or you're coming back to watercolour from a time away, you might find this useful. I'm sure you will, and get a lot of positive feedback. It's just a simple steps. All you need to do is to click the link below and download it, and it's yours for free. So grab yourself a copy. North Landing is famous for its caves, fishermen, seabirds, and the wonderful cliffs. I painted it so many times. Every time it's different. The light is different. The tide is different. And it just has a really magical appeal. Very popular with tourists. And today I'm going to capture it with a late summer scene with wonderful light, really crystal clear reflections. And it's going to be really something magical. Okay, so this is the painting. We've got a lovely scene of North Landing with the sky, the sea and the reflections. And what we're going to start first of all is do some planning. So what I like to have is a tonal sketch, and that gives me an idea of the composition, the focal point and the lights and the darks. It's a good thing to do, and it's a good habit to get into, and it gives me an idea to simplify the scene. So now let's get down to the painting. The painting is going to start with the drawing. So we're going to transpose that idea of sketch onto this paper, which is a 300 gram paper, not surface, taped to the board. And we're going to start with the horizon line, take that across, and then build up the cliffs from that, establish the darks, and then obviously establish the foreground. And the drawing element is relatively simple in this one. There's not a lot of detail. It's more large areas of colour and light and shade. But it's important that I get a feel for proportions and get it into the perspective in the right place so that it sits nicely with the eye. I'm going to finish off by putting in the foreground. The foreground is useful because it leads my eye into the picture. I don't want to clutter it too much. I'm going to simplify the rocks just to give an indication, but what I quite like is the way they are pointing into the middle of the picture, particularly on the right hand side, and that leads my eye into that focal point, which is the large cliff extension with the cave that goes into the chalk cliffs, and that will provide a lovely composition. Okay, so we're now going to apply some masking fluid. Now what this is about protecting the white areas that I'm going to put some dark washes on, so it just keeps that highlight. And I apply that with an old brush, generally speaking, an old brush that sort of have dedicated for masking fluid, mainly because they ruin a brush. Now a masking fluid can come in fluid, or it can come in a pen form that you can apply with a pen. There's various types of masking fluid. The one I'm using here is a liquid in a bottle. And the other thing to remember is to ensure that you clean your brush, and ideally with some soap so that it's cleaned and ready to use again. Okay, so now we're going to start with the painting. The first thing is to establish the sky. I'm going to work with the sky and work my way down the painting. And the colour story we're going to start with is going to be a nice blue sky with a transitional colour of blue, and then take that down with a little bit of crimson, all onto a damp surface. Colour wise, I'm going to start with an ultramarine blue and light red at the very top, and then I'm going to transition that to an ultramarine blue and Prussian blue as I come down, with a little bit of cobalt blue in there, and then some crimson just towards the horizon, just to give that feeling of lower cloud in the distance. So after wetting the sky, we're going to leave it just to soak in, just so that it takes that sheen off and it's water soaked in. And then I'm going to start with a deeper colour, deeper blue at the top. Bear in mind, it's always going to dry lighter, so I want to try and get the colour value strong enough that has that punch in the picture. And then as I come down, I'm going to change it to the ultramarine and the Prussian blue. And as I come to the very bottom, I'm going to add a little bit of crimson, very pale, but nonetheless crimson on the horizon, which gives that feeling of distant depth and that sort of diffusion on the horizon. Be careful not to paint over the cliffs. I want to keep those sort of clear at this stage, and then we'll let it dry. Okay, now I think the sky's dry enough. I'm now going to work on the cliffs, particularly the tops of the cliffs and those sandstone at the bottom of the cliffs. And I just want to get the tone right on there, get that warmth. I'm going to start with a mix of yellow ochre and raw sienna, which shall just give that extra light. And then I'm going to make two greens, one bold green with Prussian blue, lemon yellow and yellow ochre, and then one slightly more distant transparent green of Prussian blue, lemon yellow and raw sienna. And I'm going to start with the yellow ochre and the raw sienna on the top of the cliffs, drop that in, even add a little bit of light red here and there just to capture. That's going to be the light tone. It's later in the season, we've got the grasses a bit more mature. I want to drop that in, and then I'm going to drop in some deeper grass colour, particularly on the bright piece of cliff just the top of that. And then I will follow on with the other green, the less strong green, and drop that in amongst the top so that it has a diffused look, a feel of diffused, but make sure you don't smother all that yellow ochre. Keep that there and just let it float in, and that will give a lovely light effect to the green on the top. And obviously I'm also going to drop in towards the bottom of the cliffs, drop that colour in as well. Now I can see I've made a bit of a mistake. It's bled into the sky. We've got that horrible feeling of, oh dear, what's going wrong? But the key here is just not to panic about it. It's made a mistake, it's bled into the sky. We'll just leave that now and we'll fix it later. We have a plan. There's always a plan with watercolour. The key is to just hold back, don't panic, and don't dive into it, and we'll deal with that at a later stage. Okay, so while we let those mistakes dry, don't worry about them, put them to one side. We're now going to deal with the light greys, the light tones on the cliffs. And we're going to start with cobalt blue and light red, varied mix, and we're going to drop that into the cliffs, into the shadow areas. We're also going to add some water to it as we drop it in, and we're also going to lift it off a little bit so we get a bit of a varied feel of lighter grey. It's just that initial stab at getting the shade in the cliffs, and we'll just drop it in and shape it, and it will start to set the scene. From that, we will also bring that colour into the top of the cliffs to create a little bit of shadow where there is in the grass, and we'll also bring it into the foreground rocks which are on the water's edge, and they're much stronger, but we'll use this as an initial stab at the shade. Okay, so it's now thoroughly dry, and what we're going to do, we're going to revisit those problem areas, those mistakes I've made, and we're going to first start by getting some number 8 brush and with some clear water, wet the areas that affected, just the sky areas, not onto the cliffs, but just the sky areas, but bigger than the areas affected. And then I'm going to squeeze off my brush, and then I'm just going to tease my brush into those areas, firstly to take off the tide marks which have been caused by that cauliflower shape, that explosion of colour and as it dried. So just do that, just gently tease it in. They will then disappear. Obviously we've got some like a green just popping into the sky, so we just need to follow on by adding a little bit of blue colour into that mix, and it will just make those areas disappear. And if you just get some blue area, it's going to be a little bit darker than the sky stands at the moment, but of course it will dry lighter. So you just got to make that effect and it will remove those. I'm going to do the other one as well. Well, there's 3 areas effectively, and we're just going to tease that out, add some colour back in, and you'll find that because we let it dry and then we've revisited it and fixed it, you can manage watercolour and you can manage these mistakes really, really well. So it's just a simple tick. The danger is that you go in there too early when you first make your mistake and try to instantly correct it. Sometimes you get away with that, but most of the time you just make a really horrible mess. So just do that and then that will remove. I've also, for some reason, I've got a little bit of a white patch in the top corner of the paper as well. And what I'm going to do there, I'm going to wet that paper in there as well. And then I'm going to add a little bit of blue into the place, into that square, and that would make that disappear as well. Okay, so now that's dry, we're going to start with the middle tone grey on the cliffs, on the shadow areas. And this is going to be a mix of cobalt blue, crimson and burnt umber. Only a touch of crimson, but it will just make a deeper dark that we're going to start to drop in to the shadow areas, into the existing areas of shadow. Just drop that in. We're also going to lift it off a little bit just to diffuse it and break it in, and that'll just give that extra feel of starting to build up that 3-dimensional feel to the cliffs and the shadows. I'm also going to drop this little dark onto the top of the cliffs as well, into the grasses, just to give a little bit of shade here and there and pick up a little bit of the sense of detail, but not really detail, just picking up that light and dark. And we're going to work our way along right through the cliff with this nice stronger dark. And I'm going to add a little bit of, reinforce a little bit of the warmer colours, the yellow ochre as well, on the left and on the top of the cliffs as well, just to build up that little bit of body to the warmth of the top of the cliffs. So it's all about developing the middle tones. So not only are we doing the dark, but we're going to develop those warmer ochres and greens as well. Okay, so after we've done that, we're going to add the ultramarine blue, the burnt umber and crimson. This will make a stronger mix of dark, and we're going to put that third layer of stronger darks to really pick out the shadows and the depth of the darks, and it will really give that, reinforce that 3-dimensional feel. That's going to go into the heart of the cliffs, also along the foreshore with the water, and just carefully apply those across the board so you've got that really lovely feeling of 3 dimension to the cliffs. Alongside doing this, I'm also going to add a little bit of the yellow ochre onto the front of the cliffs, just on the highlight areas, just to warm them up a little bit. Otherwise they're going to be what I feel a danger of being a cold white. It's going to be very pale, but it's just going to set the mood a little bit. And I'm also going to drop in a little bit of extra really pale shade as well. So it's just, we're just topping off the feel for the cliffs. Okay, once that's dry, I'm then going to get my finger and remove the masking fluid. That will expose those white areas that were protected. And then I'll get my dark and just shape some of those, what are going to be rocks really, that are just sparkling against the seaweed. So I'm just going to carefully put those and just give them a little bit of shape, and probably just drop in a little bit of final darks into the cliffs just to add any extra touches that might be needed here and there. Okay, so now we're going to get to the really exciting bit. I always like painting cliffs, but I even more so like painting water. It really is magical stuff. And what we're going to start first of all with this scene, not only have we got the sea, but we've got a shallow bit of water in the foreground where the rocks are. And what we're going to do, we're going to wet that area, and then we're going to apply a weak diffused grey onto there to sort of give that feeling of the seabed, just the seabed that's coming through the water. That's the initial step. That's going to be cobalt blue, raw sienna, and a touch of crimson, and it's going to be applied like a diffused grey. Just quickly do it and just let it settle. Okay, so we're going to wet the water area evenly now, and then we're going to mix up some Prussian blue, lemon yellow and yellow ochre for a reflective green, and I'm also going to mix up some yellow ochre with a touch of raw sienna as an underwash and have those ready. So as soon as that's wet and nicely evenly wet, we'll then go into that with firstly some yellow ochre, drop in that nice and carefully, just particularly on the left hand side. It's where those cliffs are reflecting into the water and you can really see that sort of effect. We're going to drop that yellow ochre in, and then once that is settled in and diffused, I'm then going to mix the darker green, which is, well, the first green, which is the Prussian blue, lemon yellow and yellow ochre, that first one. Mix that in and drop that in to just pick out the shadow areas of the reflections. So it's a bit of negative paint. I'm going to drop that in, just vertical, sort of diffuse vertical lines, just to give that feeling of reflection in those areas. And then when that is sort of established, and just again moving towards a diffused surface, because you can get too wet too quickly, because you can, not only are you going to wet the surface, but you add water. You just let it soak in, and then we'll mix a further dark bit of green, and that will be Prussian blue, lemon yellow and crimson, and then we'll drop that in to just reflect those really dark areas. So you've got those sort of feeling of vertical, not stripes, but vertical feelings of reflection that are in the water. Now with the crimson grey from the shallow water, I'm just going to drop a little bit more of that in and bring it up to that area of green reflection area, just all on the diffused, and just drop that in just so that they meet up to one another. Okay, so now we've got a really exciting bit, which is a deeper blue, and we're going to bring that into the sea and bring it into the shallow sea and get those reflections and ripples. We're going to start with a deeper blue of ultramarine blue and Prussian blue, painted onto this damp surface because we've pre-wet the water area. It's still damp. We're going to drop this in, start at the horizon line on the right hand side, and then gradually bring that down using nice, big, decisive brush strokes, bringing that down. Obviously careful to paint around the rocks that are above the water. Don't want to go over those. Deepen this colour, and as I come down, I'm also going to add a little bit of cobalt blue to the mix as I come down. But these big brush strokes, firstly on the right, are going to go on really nicely, and then as I come down, I'm also going to brush across with a singular brush stroke through to the left of the paint over these reflective areas, and this will just capture the soft ripples and really give a real magical feel when you complete the picture. And I'm just going to do these with the decisive singular brush strokes. It's important because that really does just give that magic to this reflective water. As we come down, the surface is still diffused, it's still wet, so it's got that diffusion. When I say wet, it's moist really, got that diffusion. I'm going to add a bit of crimson into that blue, and then we're just going to drop this down to give the shadow into the shallow water effect. But it all needs to be done on a moist and damp surface, so there's no hard tide marks. Okay, so we're now going to lift off using the brush, particularly where the reflections are, just to allow some of the highlights to come through, and then we'll let it dry and then move the masking fluid. Okay, so now we're going to paint the stones. It's just a range of delicate colours: yellow ochre, burnt sienna, light red, probably a little bit of crimson in there as well. Just put those stones in, drop them, let them diffuse individually, and that will set the scene. Then we'll let that soak in, and then we'll put some deeper colours in, deeper, starting on the right hand side. We're going to use ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and a little bit of crimson, particularly to put that seaweed that's both floating and above the water. And we'll start from the right and work our way across to the left with that. And then after that's settled in, I'm then going to, with a dry brush, really, I'm going to make some stronger dark, ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and just drop some of that in to create some shadow for the stones, and that will just build up a bit of shape to the foreground. And once we've done that, we're then going to re-wet the water and give that quite a wetting, and then I'm going to establish a stronger blue on the right hand side with the sea. I just feel as though it just needs that little bit more strength to the blue, so I'm just going to drop that in, and then we'll take a stock and put some final touches. Okay, so there we have it, the finished painting. I'll put a mount around it as I usually do, and I'm really quite pleased with it in the end. I think we've caught the reflection, we've caught the light on the cliffs, we've caught pretty much what I was after, and most importantly, I've managed to fix the mistakes. You remember those mistakes that we had where we bled the cliffs into the sky, and we've got those horrible cauliflower elements. The key was not to panic. Can you see, just not to panic, leave it, let it dry, and then have a plan to remove it. And the plan is actually really quite simple, because what you do is you let it dry and then re-wet it, and then we just moved the brush on the surface and just removed the marks, the tide marks, and then if we needed to add a bit more colour onto the damp, we did do. And as you can see now we've got the rest of the picture in, it's disappeared. The key there is not to panic, just keep calm, and you can actually really easily remove these things. And if you can do that and you can practice that, it gives you terrific confidence with your painting, because there's nothing worse than getting panicked by something that you're not quite happy with and you don't know what to do. So without further ado, what I'm going to say now is a big thank you to you all, because we've got 5,000 subscribers this week, which is absolutely massive to the channel. A really big thank you to everybody, and that really gets us out to a wider audience. So for those of you that have found us for the first time, like this material, please do like and subscribe. That gets us picked up by a wider audience, and as you can see, we're getting picked up enormously. And also we've got over 1,400 people on the watercolour guide, which is fantastic as well. And with the watercolour guide, not only do you get the guide as I've shown earlier, but you get the weekly newsletter, which gets picked up with tips and tricks and various elements around techniques. So I hope you're finding that useful. And it's wonderful also to be answering so many emails from you all, and have any queries and elements that you're struggling with or you want help with, please send them in and we'll try to answer them as quickly as we can. We are getting a lot now, so it just takes us our time to get through them all, but nonetheless it's great to hear from you all. Also, good news, we've just about completed our online course, which we've been developing now for the last 6 months. It's got a whole raft of paintings and resources in there, which will take you through as beginners or new people coming back into watercolour, and it will get involved in much more detail, and it'll be able to take you through the steps that we've touched on in the YouTube channel. So it's something that we're developing, and we'll talk more about it as we go forward, but we're really excited about it. And we're looking to launch this late November, early December, and the first 50 people that sign up will get a free materials kit with all the necessary equipment that go with it that I'm using to produce these paintings. So it's really quite exciting, and something to watch out for. In the meantime, enjoy and keep painting.